The rain had fallen since morning, slow, endless, gray. The town was silent except for the sound of it touching the rooftops and rolling down the narrow streets. Elias walked alone, coat damp and heavy, his hands deep in his pockets. The sky looked like lead, and the air carried that smell of earth that follows every long storm. Somewhere beyond the clouds, the sun was still there, he knew, but he hadn't seen it for days. He had returned to the old town by the river after almost 10 years away. Nothing seemed to have changed except himself. The chapel still stood at the corner of the square, its stone walls covered in moss, its wooden doors worn smooth by time. The last time he had entered that church, he was a different man, younger, proud, unbroken. Now he came back older, hollowed out by regret, carrying the weight of too many choices he couldn't undo. Inside, the faint scent of incense clung to the air. Candles flickered near the altar like trembling hearts, and somewhere in the distance, an organ hummed faintly, as if it remembered a song from long ago. Elias removed his hat and stood still, unsure whether to kneel or leave. His faith had withered slowly over the years, not with anger but neglect, like a lamp that burned out quietly when no one remembered to refill it. He sat down in the last pew, hands clasped, staring at the crucifix. The face of Christ looked down on him, serene, sorrowful, almost alive in the candlelight. And for the first time in years, Elias felt something stir deep inside him. Not peace, not yet, but longing. He whispered, "I don't even know how to start." The voice of the priest startled him. "Start with silence. The rest will come." Elias turned. The priest was old, his hair white as ash, but his eyes burned with a kind of peace that age couldn't dim. He introduced himself as Father Adrian. Without another word, he sat beside Elias. For a long moment, neither spoke. The rain outside softened into a whisper. Finally, Elias said, "I've done things I can't take back. I've hurt people. I've hurt myself." Father Adrian nodded slowly. "Then you've come to the right place." Elias shook his head. "You don't understand. Some wounds don't heal." The priest smiled faintly. "Grace doesn't ask wounds to heal by themselves. It fills them." Those words settled into Elias like a stone dropped into deep water. Grace. He had forgotten what that word even felt like. The world he'd lived in for years had no use for it. After leaving the town, he had built a life that looked successful from the outside. Wealth, work, endless noise to drown out the silence inside. But it had all collapsed one winter when a deal he thought would make him rich destroyed everything instead. And then came the shame, the isolation, the quiet nights where he wished the sun would never rise again. He had returned now not out of faith but exhaustion, because there was nowhere else left to go. Father Adrian placed a hand on the back of the pew. "Do you know what St. Paul wrote in Romans?" he asked softly. "Where sin increased, grace abounded all the more." It means that even in the darkest shadow, light still dares to enter. You only need to let it. Elias stared at the crucifix again. The flickering candlelight made it seem as if Christ's eyes were open, not with judgment, but with deep, endless mercy. "I don't deserve it," he said. "None of us do," the priest replied. "That's what makes it grace." The rain outside had stopped. Through the stained glass windows, a faint golden hue began to seep in, the evening sun breaking through the clouds at last. The light spilled across the pews, touching the crucifix, touching Elias's hands. Father Adrian rose. "Stay a while. Talk to him. He already knows everything you're afraid to say." Then he walked toward the sacristy, leaving Elias alone in the soft, golden quiet. For a long time, Elias didn't move. He watched the light crawl across the floor, warming the stone like a slow heartbeat. Something inside him began to tremble, not from fear, but from the memory of being known. He bowed his head, the first tear falling before he could stop it. "Lord," he whispered, "if you're still there, show me that it's not too late." The wind shifted, and one candle near the altar burned brighter than the rest, as if answering. Elias exhaled, his breath breaking into a sob that turned into prayer. Not words, not requests, just the ache of a heart that wanted to believe again. Hours passed unnoticed. By the time he rose, night had fallen. Only one candle remained lit, the one he had stared at all evening. He stepped closer to it, and as he did, he noticed an inscription carved into the wood beneath the crucifix. The words were faint but clear. "The shadow does not erase the light, it only proves its presence." He traced the carving with his fingers, feeling the truth of it pulse beneath his skin. When he stepped outside, the air was cool and fresh, the sky clear for the first time in weeks. The town glowed under the moonlight, quiet but alive. Elias walked slowly toward the river, his steps lighter than before. He didn't have answers yet, only the faint spark of something he thought he had lost forever. Grace had not come with thunder or visions, but quietly, like the breaking of dawn. And as he crossed the small bridge over the river, he looked up and saw the stars reflected in the water. Countless points of light, each one shimmering against the darkness that tried and failed to swallow them. He smiled for the first time in years. Where sin abounds, he whispered, grace abounds more. And though he didn't yet understand what lay ahead, he knew this. He was walking toward the light. The next morning broke with a sky washed clean by rain. Sunlight spilled through the narrow window of the small inn where Elias was staying, resting softly on the wooden floor. The sounds of life began to stir outside. The bark of a distant dog, a vendor calling from the corner of the square, the slow rhythm of a bell marking the hour of prayer. For the first time in years, Elias awoke without the weight of dread pressing on his chest. His sleep had been dreamless, yet strangely peaceful, as if something unseen had been keeping watch over him through the night. He rose and opened the window, the scent of wet earth mixed with the sweetness of morning air. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply, realizing how long it had been since he had simply stopped to notice the world. For so many years, he had rushed through life chasing what he thought mattered, success, recognition, control, only to find that all of it vanished like mist. Now the stillness felt foreign, but also sacred. He made his way back to the chapel. The doors were open again, and sunlight poured through the stained glass, scattering colors across the marble floor. Father Adrian was there, kneeling in prayer before the altar. When he noticed Elias, he smiled. "You're back early," he said. Elias nodded. "I didn't sleep much these past years. Last night I finally did." "That's how grace works," the priest said quietly. "It doesn't always speak in miracles. Sometimes it just lets you rest." They sat together in one of the front pews. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Elias asked, "You mentioned something yesterday, about the word. What did you mean?" Father Adrian folded his hands. "Bishop Fulton Sheen once said that God speaks only one word, and that word holds all things. It's not a word of syllables, but of being. Everything we are, everything we long for, is hidden within it." Elias frowned thoughtfully. "You mean Christ himself?" "Yes," the priest said. "The word made flesh, the mind of God speaking into the silence of our world. When we forget that word, we lose our meaning. But when we listen again, everything broken begins to find its place." Elias stared ahead at the crucifix. "I think I forgot how to listen." "That's all right," the priest said gently. "He hasn't forgotten how to speak." After their conversation, Father Adrian gave Elias a small task, to spend each morning reading a few lines from Scripture and to walk by the river in silence. "Don't try to understand everything," he said. "Just listen. Grace teaches through stillness." That afternoon, Elias did as he was told. The river ran low from the storm, its water moving slowly, shimmering under the midday sun. He followed the narrow path along the bank until he reached the old stone bridge, the same bridge he had crossed the night before. He sat there for a while, watching the water flow. A child's laughter broke the quiet. He looked over to see a small boy throwing stones into the river, each one making ripples that spread and vanished. The boy looked up and waved. Elias nodded back, smiling faintly. The boy's mother called from a distance, and he ran off, leaving behind a single flat stone by the riverbank. Elias picked it up. Its surface was smooth, glistening like glass. He turned it over in his hand and remembered something the priest had said. Grace fills wounds. The stone had been shaped by years of being struck and washed by the current. It had lost its sharp edges through the very process that should have broken it. Elias held it tightly. Maybe the same could happen to a heart. That night, he returned to the chapel again. The candles were burning low. Father Adrian was gone, but a note waited for Elias on the pew. "Tomorrow, meet me at the old library behind the monastery. There's someone you should meet." The next day, he followed the narrow cobblestone road to the outskirts of the town. The monastery rose before him like a fortress of silence, its walls covered in ivy, its windows high and narrow. The scent of old paper and candle wax filled the air inside. Father Adrian greeted him at the entrance and led him to a back room where an elderly monk was copying scripture by hand. His name was Brother Thomas, a man with trembling hands but steady eyes. "This is the one I told you about," Father Adrian said. "He knows what it means to live by the word." Brother Thomas smiled faintly. "Ah, the word," he said. His voice was fragile but warm. "So few listen to it now. They read it, yes, but they do not hear it." Elias tilted his head. "What's the difference?" "The difference," the monk replied, "is between knowing about God and knowing Him." He placed his quill down and turned toward Elias. "Tell me, son, what drove you away from Him?" Elias hesitated. The question pierced him deeper than he expected. "Pride," he said at last, "and fear. I thought I could make my own way. I thought grace was for the weak." The monk nodded slowly. "Ah, yes, that is what sin whispers, that you are alone, that strength comes from yourself. But grace says something else, that true strength is surrender." He opened the old book in front of him, the Gospel of John. "Listen to this," he said softly. "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." The words echoed through the quiet room. Elias felt something move within him again. That same pulse of longing that had stirred in the chapel. Brother Thomas smiled. "That word still speaks. Every time your heart turns toward mercy, every time you choose forgiveness over pride, every time you rise from the fall, that is the word breathing in you." Elias swallowed hard. "But what if I fail again?" The old monk's eyes softened. "Then grace will find you again. Do you know why? Because Christ didn't die for the strong. He died for those who know they can't stand without Him." Outside, the bell rang for noon prayer. The sound filled the monastery halls like a heartbeat. Elias bowed his head. He didn't have words to pray, only tears. But Brother Thomas didn't speak. He simply placed a hand on Elias's shoulder, as though saying that sometimes silence was the purest prayer. That evening, as Elias walked back to the town, the sun was setting in streaks of crimson and gold. He passed by the orphanage on the hill where children were lighting small candles by the window. He stopped for a moment and watched them. Each little flame flickered against the darkness, fragile yet unafraid. He thought of his own heart, battered, dim, but not extinguished. That night, before sleep, he knelt by the small candle beside his bed and whispered, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." And in that quiet, he thought he heard something, not with his ears, but deep inside his soul. "My grace is enough for you." For the first time in years, Elias believed it. He drifted into sleep with the faint glow of the candle painting soft light on the wall. Outside, the moon rose high, washing the world in silver, while unseen above, stars shimmered, countless, patient and ancient, like the promises of God that never fade, no matter how far a man has wandered. Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of Elias's life began to change. Each morning he rose before sunrise to walk along the river and read from the worn pages of scripture Father Adrian had given him. At first the words were distant, like echoes from another world, but as time passed they began to find their way into his heart, soft and persistent, like the light that slowly dissolves the fog over the water. He began to notice small things again, the chirping of sparrows at dawn, the smell of bread baking in the village, the way the sunlight filtered through the willow trees and danced on the river's surface. Grace, he realized, wasn't something distant and abstract. It was in everything that continued to exist despite the darkness. Every breath, every sunrise, every act of kindness freely given. One morning as he stood on the old bridge, he saw a woman struggling to carry a basket up the steep path by the riverbank. Instinctively, he hurried down to help her. She thanked him with a tired smile and introduced herself as Miriam. Her husband had been injured months ago, and she had been caring for him and their two small children alone. Elias offered to help repair their roof, which had been damaged in the last storm. At first, he thought it would be a simple act of charity, something he could do to ease his conscience. But as the days went on, he found himself returning again and again. Not out of guilt, but because something inside him felt alive when he served. Miriam's husband, Daniel, was quiet but kind. As they worked together, Elias learned that he had once been a carpenter. His hands were scarred and strong, though one arm remained stiff from injury. One afternoon, while they rested, Daniel said quietly, "The storms ruined everything we built. But I've learned that sometimes, when everything collapses, God gives you a chance to build something better, something eternal." Elias nodded, struck by the truth of it. "Maybe I came here because everything I built fell apart." Daniel smiled faintly. "Then you're in good company." As the sun dipped low over the horizon, the three of them prayed together for the first time. It was awkward at first. Elias had forgotten the rhythm of prayer. But as he listened to their simple words of gratitude, something in him broke open. There were no grand phrases, no formal speeches, just a humble thankfulness for daily bread, for shelter, for another day to try again. That night, as Elias walked home, he realized that grace was teaching him not through visions or miracles, but through people, through Daniel's quiet endurance, through Miriam's patience, through the laughter of their children as they played in the yard. It was as though God was whispering through the ordinary, showing that every small act of love was stronger than the weight of sin that once chained his heart. But peace rarely comes without testing. One evening, while repairing the fence near the river, Elias heard a familiar voice behind him, cold, sharp, and heavy with memory. It was Victor, a former business partner from the city, the man whose betrayal had cost Elias everything. For a moment, the world seemed to freeze. The years of resentment came rushing back, heavy as the river current after rain. Victor looked uneasy. "I heard you were here," he said. "I came to see if the rumors were true, that you found religion." Elias said nothing. His jaw tightened, his pulse quickened. Victor stepped closer. "I didn't mean for things to happen the way they did, but you were greedy too. Don't act like I was the only one." Anger flared like lightning. Elias felt the old self rise, the one who lived on pride and revenge. His hands curled into fists. Every word he wanted to shout burned on his tongue. But then, a memory, the voice of Father Adrian. Where sin increased, grace abounded all the more. He closed his eyes. The river roared beside them, and somewhere within its sound, Elias felt the tug of grace pulling him back from the edge. He opened his eyes and said quietly, "You're right. We both failed, but I'm done fighting ghosts." Victor stared at him in disbelief. "You forgive me?" Elias hesitated. "I don't know if I can yet, but I'm willing to try." Victor's expression softened, just for a moment, before he nodded and walked away, leaving Elias alone by the river. The wind stirred the reeds, the sun dipped low, and Elias fell to his knees. He whispered, "Lord, help me mean those words." The following Sunday, Father Adrian's homily echoed exactly what Elias was living. Grace is not the denial of sin, the priest said, but its transformation. When light enters darkness, the shadows do not vanish immediately. They fade as the flame grows brighter. Elias sat in the back pew, tears filling his eyes. He realized that forgiveness wasn't a single act, but a journey, one he would have to walk every day. But for the first time, he wasn't walking alone. That night, he dreamt of the river. It was vast and golden, flowing endlessly toward a horizon of light. When he stepped into it, the water was warm, cleansing, alive. He looked down and saw that his reflection was no longer dark and broken, but whole. Not because the scars were gone, but because they had become part of something beautiful. When he awoke, dawn was breaking. He rose, knelt by the window, and whispered the only prayer that mattered. "Let me be part of your river, Lord. Let your grace flow through me." Later that morning, as he returned to the chapel, he found Father Adrian waiting for him. The priest handed him a small wooden cross, simple and worn smooth by years of touch. "You've been carrying a heavy burden," he said. "This is lighter. Take it." Elias closed his fingers around it. "What should I do with it?" "Keep it," Father Adrian said. "And when you feel darkness return, hold it close. Remember, Christ didn't just die to erase sin. He died to turn it into redemption." Elias nodded slowly. "And if I fall again, then get up," the priest said with a faint smile. "Grace will be there before you even rise." That evening, as the sun bled crimson over the hills, Elias stood by the river once more. He held the cross in his hand and watched the reflection of the light shimmer on the water's surface. The current moved steadily, never rushing, never stopping, a mirror of the mercy that had carried him this far. He whispered into the wind, "Thank you for not giving up on me." The river answered with a sound like a sigh, soft, eternal, alive. And for the first time since his return, Elias didn't feel haunted by his past. He felt held. The light on the horizon dimmed, but the glow within him did not. Grace had not erased his story, it had rewritten it. And though night soon fell, Elias knew the morning would come again, because grace, like the river, never ceases to flow. The first frost of winter crept quietly over the valley, painting the fields in silver and wrapping the town in stillness. Elias awoke before dawn, as he always did now, and for a while he just sat in silence by the window. The world outside glowed faintly under the rising light, and the river below moved in slow, shimmering waves, its surface rippling like breath in the cold. Everything seemed fragile yet alive. Weeks had passed since that meeting by the river with Victor. The wound was not gone, but it no longer ruled him. He had written a letter, not perfect but honest, telling Victor that though he still struggled, he was praying for peace between them. He hadn't received a reply, but that didn't matter. Forgiveness was no longer a transaction. It was freedom. Elias had started helping regularly at the monastery with Father Adrian and Brother Thomas. Some days he cleaned, some days he chopped wood, and some days he simply sat in the chapel while the monks prayed. There was something about their rhythm, the way they sang the psalms with quiet reverence, that began to shape his own heart. He was learning that faith was not built in sudden bursts of emotion, but through daily surrender, through choosing again and again to trust when feelings faltered. One evening, as snow began to fall softly outside, Father Adrian invited Elias into his study. The room was warm with candlelight, and the faint scent of incense hung in the air. The priest was seated by the window, a worn Bible open in his lap. "Do you know why I called you here?" Father Adrian asked. Elias shook his head. The old priest smiled gently. "Because I believe the Lord has something more for you than just healing. Grace was never meant to end with being forgiven. It's meant to overflow." Elias looked puzzled. "Overflow?" "Yes," Father Adrian said, leaning forward. "Grace is a river, not a lake. It moves, it carries, it gives life to others. You've let it touch you. Now it's time to let it flow through you." Elias felt a quiet fear rise in his chest. "But I don't know how. I'm not a priest, not a teacher. I don't even know if I have the right to speak of God after everything I've done." The priest's eyes softened. "You don't speak of yourself, Elias. You speak of what he has done in you. And that story, the one written through your scars, will reach hearts that sermons never could." Elias sat in silence. He had never thought of his pain as something that could serve a purpose. All his life, he had seen it as evidence of failure, of shame. But now, slowly, he began to realize that maybe his brokenness was the very place where God's light had entered. Over the next few days, Father Adrian asked him to help with a small mission, visiting the elderly and sick who couldn't make it to Mass. Elias hesitated at first, but the first home they visited changed everything. It was a small stone cottage on the edge of the woods, belonging to an old woman named Clara. Her hands were frail, her eyesight dim, yet when Elias entered, she smiled as though she'd been waiting for him her entire life. They prayed together, and she asked him to read aloud from the book of Romans, the same passage that had once opened his heart. As he read the words, "Where sin increased, grace abounded all the more," his voice trembled. Clara reached out, touching his hand. "You sound like someone who believes that," she said softly. Elias nodded. "I didn't always," she smiled. "None of us did at first. That's why God keeps sending reminders, sometimes through people who've fallen the hardest." He left her home with tears in his eyes. Grace had come full circle. Once received, now given. The river that had washed over his heart was beginning to flow outward, quietly nourishing others without him even realizing it. Days passed, and winter deepened. The monastery prepared for Christmas, hanging pine boughs and candles throughout the chapel. The whole valley seemed to shimmer with expectancy, not just for celebration, but for renewal. On Christmas Eve, the church filled with light. Families gathered, voices lifted in carols. The air alive with warmth despite the cold outside. Elias stood near the back, holding a candle. As the flame passed from one person to another, the dark sanctuary slowly transformed into a sea of flickering stars. Father Adrian spoke from the altar. The Christ child was born into a world of shadow, yet no darkness could overcome his light. Remember this, grace did not arrive in power, but in humility, not as thunder, but as a whisper in the night. Elias watched as the light danced across the faces of those gathered. The poor, the weary, the joyful, the broken. It was then he understood. Grace was not a concept to be studied, but a living presence to be shared. After the service, he lingered near the altar. The old priest approached, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You see now," he said quietly. "The light that once found you, it's shining through you." Elias turned to look at him, his eyes glistening. "I never thought he could use someone like me." Father Adrian smiled. "He only uses people like you." That night, Elias didn't return to his inn. Instead, he stayed in the chapel, watching the candlelight flicker and fade as the hours passed. Outside, the snow fell in gentle silence, blanketing the world in white, a quiet symbol of mercy covering what was once barren. He thought of all he had lived through, the pride that broke him, the despair that nearly ended him, the grace that lifted him, the forgiveness that reshaped him. Every wound had become a window through which light entered. Every sin forgiven had become a story of mercy. Before dawn, he whispered one final prayer. Lord, if my life can be light for someone else lost in the dark, let it be yours to use. The first rays of morning touched the horizon, painting the sky in hues of rose and gold. The bell of the monastery rang out, breaking the stillness, calling the world to prayer. Elias stepped outside and looked toward the river, the same river where he once knelt, where he had first felt the whisper of grace. It shimmered under the newborn sun, endless, unhurried, alive. He smiled, lifting his face to the light. Where sin abounded, grace abounded more, he murmured once again. Not as a confession this time, but as a testimony. And as the sound of the bell echoed across the valley, Elias felt something deep within him settle. The peace of knowing he was no longer running from God, but walking with him. The lamp of his faith, once nearly extinguished, now burned steady and bright. He turned toward the chapel, ready for the day's prayers, ready for whatever came next. The shadows were still part of the world, but they no longer frightened him. He had learned that light does not need to erase darkness, only to shine within it. That was the secret of grace, not escape, but transformation. He whispered softly as he entered the chapel, "Thank you for finding me in the dark, and for teaching me how to stay in the light." Then, as the morning sun rose higher, he lifted his candle once more, the same candle he had carried that night in the church, and placed it before the crucifix. Its flame shimmered, small yet unwavering, like a promise kept between heaven and earth. And as he prayed, the world outside was reborn in light. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to let grace ripple forward. Like this video, share it with someone who needs hope tonight. Subscribe for more prayers, and leave your amen in the comments to remind the world that light still shines in every shadow.